So one of the questions that I get asked a lot is, what is the best weekly schedule covering BJJ training, rolling, strength, and cardio? Now, first of all, I am not a sports scientist and I don't have a background in sports sciences, and I'm not qualified to give any advice regarding strength training and cardio. But as far as jiu-jitsu goes, now, I'm assuming a beginner over 30 that trains, let's say 4 times a week. Okay, let's say you have 3 classes on whatever, Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, and then you go to open mat on Saturday. Okay, it's something realistic. Now, how should your weekly schedule look like in terms of jiu-jitsu training? Now, I think that the nuts and bolts of your training schedule should be the situations in which you're just looking at a position and you're understanding it because someone is explaining it to you. Okay? I'm not a big fan of, drilling as in getting the reps in, as sometimes people say. When I coach, I just sit there with my students and I try to explain to them how, what, when, and why positions work. Okay? And I explain the strategies associated to the positions and so on and so forth. Okay? This is where you really, when you go deep, nuts and bolts, and obviously if you're in a beginner's class, it will go to a certain depth. If you're in an advanced class, it will go much deeper. Okay? You will assume a more and more skilled opponent, the higher you go. Now, as I would say, you should do this basically every time you go to training, apart from open mat. Okay, so basically every class. Now there should be a second part of your training, and this is where the waters get a bit murky because most gyms really haven't really caught up to this idea. Traditionally, when I was coming up through the ranks, there was a part of drilling which would get the repetitions in, and then there was a part of full-blown sparring. Okay, in which you would just go 100%. I think this method is outdated. Okay, I believe in bridging the distance between sort of drilling, sort of understanding how the position works, and full-blown sparring. And it has many names, but let's call it cooperative sparring. Okay, the beauty of cooperative sparring is that if you get good at it, you can communicate with your partner and you can ask your partner to increase or reduce the amount of resistance that your partner is giving you. And so you can say, well, I'm just learning this stuff. I need very little resistance. And then 3 months later, say, well, now I'm getting good. Now I need a little bit more resistance. Or today I'm training my A game, and I need full-blown resistance. But you have to get good at communicating and sort of giving feedback to your partner to the amount of resistance that you need whenever you're training a position. And obviously this can take the form of what is sometimes known as a task-based sparring or games, which is basically specific sparring. It can be back escape, it can be mount retention, it can be leg entanglements, whatever the case might be. Okay, so just about the structure of the training. Now, I truly believe that the core of your progress comes from this bit. Okay, it comes from this middle ground in which you vary the intensity of your training. You sort of ask your partner to vary the level of resistance that you're presented with. Okay, because obviously Danaher talks a lot about this. I absolutely agree. I think that if you try to jump from drilling with the doll to full-blown sparring, the gap is just too big. Okay, and you try to implement things that you just learned, that you're potentially even worse at that than you are at the rest of your game, and you're presented with an opponent that just gives 100% of their strength. You're never going to learn. Okay, so this is where skill development really happens. This is where you start putting in practice things that you learned. Okay, and I would say you should do this every time you go to class. This should be the most of your sparring. Okay, the majority of your quote-unquote sparring should look something like that. Ask your partner to increase or to reduce the amount of resistance, okay, and work on specific tasks. Do a lot of specific sparring with variable resistance, okay. And then, of course, there is full-blown sparring, okay? So non-cooperative sparring in which you just go, whatever, 100%, okay? You're counting points, whatever, all the things that people associate with full-blown sparring. Now, how much sparring should you do? Well, I would say twice a week, okay? Open mat, definitely. Open mat is a great place because you often get to train with people that aren't from your group, you know, maybe they people from other gyms, maybe they're people from other schedules, you know, people that train in the morning while you train in the evening, you hardly coincide, okay? And you get to train with them and kind of put in practice full-blown sparring. And then maybe one other day, you know, maybe you go to open mat to a different gym or whatever, okay? I don't recommend doing full-blown sparring more than twice a week, okay? It's not a very sustainable way of doing it, especially if you're a beginner. It's going to lead to injuries, to prolonged injuries, and there's nothing more frustrated, and there's nothing that will lead you to just abandon the sport that being, you know, maybe a white belt, but you've been training for 3 years, and you spent 18 months injured, and you see where I'm going with this, okay? So that's my recommendation. 3 levels of trainings, full-blown sparring, maybe twice a week, lots of cooperating sparring. Try to get good at this middle ground. Communicate to your partner. There's no shame in asking for less resistance. And then just nuts and bolts of the position, how, why, what, and when. Okay? And you shouldn't even be sweating for that.